Today we have the Midnight Alpha Phase 5 patch notes. As you know, Phase 5 is the last week, the last phase of the alpha before Midnight comes into the beta. Which is relevant, of course, because everyone who has bought the Epic Deluxe Edition of Midnight will get access to the beta. So we are now entering the last week, essentially, of the alpha. And we have gotten changes to the specs, talent trees, general talent trees, hero talent trees, and even new tier sets for the Season 1 of Midnight. Now, first one, for Unholy, your Blightburst talent now, which explodes your plagues, sucks in 4 seconds of those plague damage to do damage on everyone with your plagues on, has gotten its damage cut by essentially a third, but in return now your Putrefy is going to apply your plagues to all of the unaffected targets by your plagues. The other changes for Unholy, much like this one, weren't really that relevant, like 10% more attack power, scaling damage on your Raise Abomination, or half the time duration of your summoned Magus. DK didn't really get a lot of focus in this patch cycle, and neither did Demon Hunter or Druid. You know, Druid has gotten groundbreaking things like Nature's Bounty gaining 10% more healing, which isn't that groundbreaking, or perhaps Art of the Glaive now proccing not from Soul Fragments and casting the Hunt, but from Soul Fragments and using Sigil of Spite. So it's not that big of a set of changes for these specs. The same could be said for Evoker. You know, Preservation does get a change, and that is because your Threads of Fate have been removed from your Chrono Warden hero talent, so the last remaining talent working with Threads of Fate has also been removed from your set of hero talents. Who gets some changes though is Hunter, because both BM and Marksmanship have gotten their Apex talents released. So for BM, Bestial Rat now also summons a Dire Beast, followed by your pets doing 10% more damage, followed by, when you summon a Dire Beast, your next kill command is a guaranteed crit and puts on your enemy a bleed, an extra bleed. Now, bleed obviously is at the cornerstone of the BM style when playing the Dire Beast build, for the very simple fact that your Dire Beast spawn based on the bleeds you have on your target. 4% chance for the tick effects of the bleeds to summon the Dire Beast. So obviously that's why things like having Laceration, which puts a bleed on the target, of course Barb Shot putting a bleed on the target, Bloodshed working as an extra bleed, and now this Apex talent also working as an extra bleed to get more summons of a Dire Beast. And then because more Dire Beasts are being summoned, you get to use more kill commands for free, guaranteed crits with an extra bleed. Your pets do 10% more damage. So what it seems like is that this entire cycle is focusing, or rather favoring, more Pack Leader. Because obviously, you know, when you have your run-of-the-mill hunters playing Dark Ranger, their pet damage is not exactly that relevant. So having an Apex talent, which is supposed to probably shape your spec, telling you you're going to be doing 10% more pet damage, and this one will summon another pet to do more pet damage, and this is your pet damage, you know, it's probably not that valuable for the Dark Ranger version of BM, because Pack Leader does, of course, do way more damage with your pets. So this might be maybe a hint of the way you will play in Midnight, pet base, so maybe more likely to be playing Pack Leader. Now, Marksmanship also does get its new Apex talents when you get one of your 3 main procs as a spec. So either you get Lock and Load from auto-attacking, making your next aim shot instant and cost no focus, or Death Blow, of course, the entire center of Dark Ranger, the execute button, which in Dark Ranger turns into Black Arrow, or Surging Shots, the 15% chance of aim shot to reset the cooldown of rapid fire. So when you get one of these 3, your next related aim shot or rapid fire or kill shot, you know, the 3 ones that can be consumed with these buffs, will do additional 25% bleed damage to the target. Now, this will not be that relevant like we mentioned for BM, because Marksmanship doesn't have any synergy with bleeds. They don't have any talents or passive that does anything with bleed. They do, however, get another rank of their Apex talents, which say you deal 15% increased damage against enemies affected by this Bloody Impact bleed. Now, 15% is a relevant number. 50% is a big number. So now you want to make sure you can spread this bleed as much as possible. Now, obviously in AoE, in here, we're talking about trick shots. We're talking about ricocheting your aim shot and your rapid fire around so that you can spread these bleeds around so that you can do 15% more damage to as many mobs as possible. In single target, this is likely to have a much higher uptime, obviously, because of how often you will get to proc these and then use these, consume these buffs on a single target. The last buff, though, is that is a bit of a slot machine. When you consume one of these three, you have a 25% chance to immediately gain one of the other ones. So basically, you have Death Blow, you consume Death Blow, obviously, with your Black Arrow, and then you have a 25% chance to either gain Lock and Load, making your next aim shot free, or gaining Surging Shots, giving you the chance to reset the cooldown of Rapid Fire. Now this can get quite, as I said, quite slot machine-y, because compared to live, there's been a significant change in the way you get to proc your Death Blows. So first, this Death Blow talent is now your default one. So you don't have a 15% chance from your aim shot to gain Death Blow. You still have the base 10%. Also have lost the 8% chance to gain Death Blow from your auto attacks, for example. The main difference, though, is that while this has been lost, and now the default chance is only 10%, the main change is that now Rapid Fire has a 100% chance to grant Death Blow, a guaranteed chance to grant Death Blow. So it is now much more deterministic. It's not about a chance to proc it with Rapid Fire, an 8% chance to proc it from your auto attacks. No, it's guaranteed with Rapid Fire. So you will have to think about, for example, your Death Blow proccing by itself. So you consume Death Blow, and maybe one of the other two, Lock and Load and Surging Shots, can now proc. Maybe Surging Shots proc. So now you get to use your Rapid Fire, which is a guaranteed reset of Death Blow, and then maybe Rapid Fire procs and resets the cooldown of Rapid Fire itself, which means that now you can Rapid Fire again to reset the cooldown of Black Arrow again. But because Surging Shots procced, now one of the other two buffs has a 25% chance to proc. It could be quite interesting to keep track of these three different buffs, plus the cooldown, of course, on Rapid Fire, to work with these, especially now that you don't have your Recoras. You want to be able to make a specific set of buffs to show up the way you want with these three things for your Apex talents as a marksmanship hunter. We will see if it will become very annoying to work around this in the default Blizzard UI. The only relevant change for survival, since survival already went through last week a massive rework, is their newly added Moonlight Chakram has actually been made usable. Because before it had a whopping 31% attack power scaling, now it's been increased by almost 10 times the damage. So now it actually now does do damage, essentially. That is the one main change. Mage doesn't get much / anything, you know. Your Frost Mastery has more scaling. You start with 5% more damage from your mastery as a base default increase. This is relevant because it does change the way you will click your buttons. Your Comet Storm now will replace a Ray of Frost and not replace Blizzard. That's it. That's the only one thing that changes for Frost Mage. For Monk, you have two self-healing, self-defensive tools taken away from Brewmaster, but it's fine because they were awful. Lead from the front to heal yourself less with these three buttons, and Protect and Serve, your Vivify self-healing 30% more. It's whatever. You might be excited about Windwalker after a lot of silence looking at the 13 talent changes. No. Zenith. Your talent changing, Zenith, and then more Zenith. That's the change. Your weapons of order is now called Zenith. That's it. That's the new change for Windwalker. There is one relevant change for everyone. It's a new general 3 talent added to your Touch of Death. Chi Transfer. Touch of Death now heals you for 50% of the damage done. Now for Brewmaster, you might already have your tanky ways to survive, but for Windwalker and Mistweaver, this is not too bad. Again, you take your run-of-the-mill Windwalker, and you see that the average damage they do with Touch of Death is like in the 20 million right now. So 50% of that turned into healing. It's a 10 million heal, which if we took some random guy healing himself with a healing potion right now is healing for 11, so it's basically like a heal pot. It's an extra free healed pot attached to your Touch of Death. Obviously, yeah, you have the slight inconvenience of Touch of Death having a requirement to be used, the execute range, but outside of that, it's a pretty decent extra layer of defensiveness. Now, what is not that nice is Disc. Disc is not looking too hot right now in the alpha with the things they changed for it. Your Greater Smite is no longer 20% more damage and haste to your smite, it's only 50% more damage. And you know, for the flow of the spec, it would have been nicer to have more haste by default, especially because it would have given perhaps you also more value to other stats. It would have made it easier for you to go for crit and mastery if your spammable spell, your smite, was faster by itself. The other change are the added talent additions to Archon. So obviously now we're not talking about Disc anymore, we're talking about Holy and Shadow as well. The three main additions that were missing from the hero talent is that now Power Surge lasts for 5 additional seconds. The very fast TLDR is 1 extra ring of your Halo. You know, your Halo that expands 3 times right now. In the Midnight version, it's going to expand 4 times. The other 2 additions are much more flat in terms of power. 10% mana discount on Prayer of Healing and 15% faster cast time, as well as the flat 10% more healing and a 2% chance to now proc Surge of Light from basically all of your spells. Meanwhile, for Shadow, you get Void Volley damage and cooldown reduced, and the 3-second cooldown reduction and damage increase on your Shadow Word Death. Oracle also got its hero talent additions that were missing from this side. So Flesh Heal, Plea, and Power Radiance have healing increase. This is already a good message to the Discipline Priest. Nothing really much about Atonement to start with, just raw power in your base healing. 20% more healing with your Holy spells. Quite relevant because for a long time the power of Discipline Priest healing in its ramp windows was through Shadow. It was through, in live obviously, it was through Shadow Covenant. Popping out your Mindbender, transforming your Penance into a shadow spell to increase your shadow damage, and then you would buff this shadow damage and this shadow healing, right? Instead now you get flat 20% more healing in Atonement from your holy spells. The last one is when Power Shield or Void Shield, which is your Apex talent empowered version of your Power Shield. Once it's fully absorbed or expires, it's gonna jump to a nearby ally for 40% of its maximum absorb shield. So it's a much more direct healing focused hero talent, even more so. This is not having too good of a time right now in the alpha with all of the things they lost. To be fair, neither does Holy Priest, which has also lost a lot of things in the alpha, in basically their buttons they can press. There is one change to Rogue, which is the addition of the Deathstalker hero talents. Mass Casualty is a good extra to your AoE, because now Deathstalker's Mark deals 50% of its normal damage to all other enemies within 8 yards afflicted by Rapture, or in the case of Sub, when a stack is consumed by Black Powder, so the AoE finisher of Sub. So it's extra AoE splash damage whenever you consume your Deathstalker marks on your main target, which is very good for both of these specs. This is still fine because of your scaling of stats. Maybe this makes it more valuable for you to focus on crit, since now your crit gains more value when playing Deathstalker. Warlock doesn't really get anything. This is just a bunch of wording changes for the spec. The other additions outside of these spec changes are the additions to the tier sets of the ones that we're still missing. We're talking about 2 of the warrior specs, all of the warlocks, and then Prot Paladin, Promaster Monk, Guardian, Feral, and Balance. Now obviously these are the season 1 tier sets, so we're talking about very basic stuff. You have Shooting Stars doing more damage and giving you more astral power when not in Eclipse. All of these are pretty much in the same very straightforward vein, right? 10% more Keg Smash damage, 10% more Breath of Fire damage, 20% more Shield of Righteous damage, Affliction and Seed of Corruption do 10% more damage, Hand of Gul'dan deals 15% more damage, Chaos Bolt and Rain of Fire do 5% more damage. So these are completely irrelevant, as they could have just been patch notes. Like, it could have just been a basic spec change buffing your ability by 10% instead of being a tier set. The only few ones that could do something for you, for your set of buffs or for your tracking of durations, for example, is Affliction. Having Agony start at 2 additional stacks. A demo has your Dreadstalkers last 3 more seconds. Conflagrate generating 2 additional soul shards. Another very important thing that can happen through these tier sets is things like CDR, reducing cooldowns, like Rampage. Reducing the cooldown of Odin's Fury by 1 second is across these tier sets one of the more relevant ones in the ways it can change your playstyle, other than just flat buffs, right, which do nothing for your spec. So tier sets have been added, sure, but they are still very, very basic. We can't really expect anything groundbreaking like the ones we have currently gotten in Season 3 that can significantly change the way you play. In some cases, you know, your entire power in your tier, like for example the Essence Burst procs of Flame Shaper that are very powerful, or Hunter right now, for example Dark Ranger, getting tons of value from this tier set, right? Not really gonna happen right now in Season 1. Blizzard explained why they want to make this. Basically, a new expansion is a clean slate. We don't have any previous raid tier, we don't have hundreds of thousands of logs of Mythic Plus and the raid, we don't know how specs are doing. We are pruning 700 different buttons, we are changing a lot of stuff, so we don't know how a spec is doing. So we can't also add tier sets that could increase a certain spec's power by 20% and another spec's power by 3%, and yet make both of them balanced, because we already know how much damage, how they were performing before, so we can balance these tier sets even if they have some, you know, wildly changing, you know, wildly powerful effects to their tiers. So to go safe, we just come out with some very basic flat damage increases most of the time. That's why these new first season tier sets will be basically this boring. This is what we have for the balance tuning of the week 5 of essentially the last week of the alpha before we will enter the beta phase of Midnight. As we said, the speculation is at the beginning of the week, so we're talking about November the 5th or November the 12th at the very latest is what we can expect the beta of Midnight to come out. But for today though, on this Wednesday, weekly reset in EU as well, we can leave each other. We're starting the goodbyes as usual by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with of course everyone else who has been supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching, see you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, it's getting cold, not quite hand warmers, fingerless gloves kind of cold, but we are kind of getting there in perhaps a couple of weeks.